Now, power generation and distribution is key to attaining certain level of economic growth. As a country, we have had challenges either with insufficient generation capacity, gas pipeline vandalism, which in turn hurts the smooth operation of our businesses and manufacturing sectors of the economy. Now, recently, there have been talks as to how we can ramp up power generation, with the transmission company of Nigeria saying it needs $7.5 billion to generate 10,000 megawatts of electricity in 2019. Jibril Karim is an energy research analyst with EcoBank Group, and he joins me from Lagos to discuss how this can be achieved, among other issues. Good morning, Jibril.
Good morning.
It's good to have you on the show. Now, $7.5 billion is a huge sum of money in the midst of a tight economy where the government is trying all it can to meet its revenue target. How do you think the TCN can raise this money? Federal government, international agencies, which way?
Well, the TCN still remains a government company, so it's not a private company that can access a certain level of fund. So it will still have to be funded from the public fund available to the federal government at this stage, except there is a plan in the future which has not been made known to the public for privatizing the TCN. On the need for the fund, as revitalization of the transmission industry in Nigeria, the discussion has been going on for a while on the low level of transmission capacity of the Nigerian national grid. While there has been a lot of improvements in terms of generation, although still hindered by gas supply, and as well in the distribution aspect. The transmission company has actually been in a stall for a while. There has been low level of investment into that space, largely because it still remains privately held. It still remains publicly held by the federal government. And the fact still remains is that regardless of what the efforts of the generation companies are in terms of improving and increasing the generation capacity of Nigeria, without effective and adequate transmission network, the power being generated cannot be delivered to the places where they are needed. And this has been the case for a while now. We noticed sometimes last year when Nigerian production reached a peak of just below 5,000 megawatts, it became an issue for the transmission network. So it is indeed important that a lot of investment go into that space, but the transmission company of Nigeria as well have not made it known how they intend to go by it. Do they intend to actually totally revamp the current transmission network to a higher voltage level with higher power capacity, or they want to sectionalize the transmission network, which has been one of the requests of many in the industry for a while now, that a single grid in the country is really not an effective way of transmitting energy throughout the country.
Now, you talked about the fact that the government would still have to fund it, but do you think it has the money going by the economic situation in the country?
Well, while I'm not an economic analyst, I do believe that Nigeria has been facing challenges. If you look at it from the oil and gas perspective, which constitutes about 80-something% of the federal government revenue. If you look at the level that oil are currently today compared to the level they were in 2014, it's quite easy to point out that government revenue would have decreased by as much as 50% when compared to 2014. And in the current state of the economy, where we have states who cannot even afford to pay their staffs, and also a lot of infrastructural deficiencies that are not being fulfilled by the federal government due to lack of funding, it will be very difficult for them to pass for the federal government to embark on funding this $7.5 billion project. So, of course, they might have to look as well. Borrowing is another option. Into our international borrowing, in terms of Eurobonds to remain low, they can look at they explore that option as well. But to think in that space in terms of borrowing, they can then bring in private investors. But should they want to explore the option of having private equity go into financing the transmission network, then the government have to consider either concession or selling of stake in the transmission network.
Now, there's been the talks about building mini grids across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country in order to help the national grid. Do you subscribe to this model of power generation and distribution at the moment?
Well, the current transmission network, like I said, is a single national grid. It's not really effective if you look at it, which means it makes the whole system liable to a collapse should there be an issue with any of the generation stations. So another option, the mini grid as well, will just mean that we will be sectionalizing our transmission network into different sections that could be managed independently from the other. That's a welcome idea. However, it has to be managed. It has to be managed very effectively. We have situations where we have Lagos State, which constitutes a very high percentile of Nigeria energy demand, and a very close transmission network generation station here in the name of a power station, which still have to supply the national grid before the national grid then supply the ECO and Ikeja distribution company. All this kind of system could be actually bypassed if we are talking about a mini grid, in the sense that we have such kind of power plants that are committed to certain areas that are close by. But where this remain a challenge is the fact that a lot of Nigeria power stations are concentrated down south. All right, so to have the mini grid in geopolitical zones might not be the ideal way to do it. All right, that's more of a political statement. It have to be in a way that be well researched and well thought out on how best which section of this national grid where it should be, each section should be terminated, and where each section should take their source from, so that the current power generation companies can be well distributed across the country. But if we have to use geopolitical zones, I can tell you there are about 2 to 3 geopolitical zones in the country that does not even have a single power plant.
Now, the Ministry of Finance has said there's been disbursement to the economy for capital projects as contained in the 2016 budget. Now, how much of this disbursement can help in the execution of various projects in the current fiscal year? Now, the TCN has said that the transmission system has been relatively stable with zero system collapse.
Okay, the TCN will be right in the fact that there is zero system collapse, in the sense that what usually results in system collapse is when you have a sudden removal of the generation plant from the transmission network, or you have an introduction of heavy load area into the transmission network. But given the fact that the power that is being generated has been below the capacity of the transmission network for a while now, since we've been having challenges with gas supply to these power plants, I will see no reason while the power transmission network cannot effectively manage such level of generation, which at current level is still below 4,000 megawatts. In terms of on the side of current fiscal year disbursement, the good thing is that the government for allocation to the power sector, since the only part of the distribution, part of the electricity network that is being owned by the government still remain only the transmission company of Nigeria. What this simply means that is there is a higher opportunity of that sector getting higher allocation than, say, distribution or generation that are currently privately held now, though with government stake in them.
Now, power distribution companies are set to still reject electricity load allocated to them. Now, does this have to do with the inability to generate revenues from the various customers?
Well, unlike most of the power, what we have in electricity is that once it is generated, it has to be distributed. And what we have with a lot of these distribution companies, especially when you go outside of Lagos, Ikeja and Eko, maybe Abuja, and maybe those in the south region, is that the collection level of collection is quite low, and electricity theft is quite high in those areas as well. And what this means is that when they get higher allocations sometimes, which they will be bid for, by the way, their level of collection might not be able to match what they are being supplied. But if you look at it in the long run, you can still allocate some of the faults to the distribution companies themselves, in the sense that a lot of customers still remain properly metered. A lot of customers are still not properly metered, and the introduction of prepaid meter could actually mitigate a lot of this risk, in the sense that if a customer is using prepaid meter, you really do not have to go after the customer or start disconnecting electricity from the pole, in the sense that it's an automated process, disconnecting the customer. And this battle has been on for a while now. So as long as the distribution companies as well continue the current level of low metered customer, will continue to have this issue. So yes, part of the fault is that there is a lack of enforcement. And again, another thing is in terms of tariff as well. The tariff that is currently that we currently have in the country is quite low for the distribution companies to meet the supply that they are being allocated. In the sense that there have been a lot of negotiation to increase the tariff.
Okay.
But a lot of times these are always met by political opposition.
All right.
So tariff needs to go up, and as well the distribution companies as well need to play their own part in terms of collection.
Thank you so much, Jibril Karim, Energy Research Analyst with EcoBank Group.